The train is already one of the cleanest ways to move a human being across a continent. So why is the railway in a race to reinvent itself before 2050? Here's the paradox. Rail moves around 8% of the world's passengers and a huge share of its freight, yet it produces just 1% of transport's carbon. Mile for mile, nothing on land beats it. But that 1% still burns a lot of diesel. Put it on a chart, and the case is brutal. Per passenger, a domestic flight emits around 250 grams of carbon per kilometer. A car, about 120. A bus, 30. A train? Around 14. The train is already the answer. The job is to erase that last sliver. And diesel doesn't only warm the planet. It fouls the air we breathe. On unwired lines, every station and city approach still fills with the soot and fumes of idling engines. Cleaning rail is about the air on the platform, too. So how do trains move today? Two ways. The diesel engine, burning fuel on board, and the electric train, drawing clean power from an overhead wire, already carrying about 3/4 of the world's passenger rail. But wires are expensive, so huge stretches of track never got them. Nearly half the world's railways still run without electrification, and in the United States, almost all freight still moves behind a diesel engine. That leftover diesel is the carbon the future has to kill. And electrification is wildly uneven. Switzerland, basically 100%. India has raised from under half to nearly all of its network in a single decade. Europe sits around half. And the United States? Barely 1% of its tracks are wired. Why not just wire everything? Because overhead lines cost around €1,000,000 per kilometer. On a busy main line, worth every cent. On a quiet rural branch, impossible to justify. That gap, the lines too thin to electrify, is the problem the future has to solve. Enter the first contender, hydrogen. A hydrogen train carries no wire and no diesel. Instead, a fuel cell combines hydrogen with oxygen from the air, producing electricity to drive the motors, and the only thing out of the tailpipe is water vapor. In 2018, this stopped being theory. Germany's Corridor Island became the world's first hydrogen passenger train in service. Top speed 140 kilometers an hour, a range near 1,000 kilometers, emitting nothing but steam. And the range kept climbing. In 2024, a Stadler hydrogen train ran 2,803 kilometers on a single fill, over 46 hours without refueling. A world record. On paper, hydrogen looked unstoppable. And it wasn't only Germany. Britain rebuilt a commuter train to run on hydrogen. Italy ordered fuel cell trains for its Alpine valleys. France lined up a dual-mode fleet. For a few short years, hydrogen was the clear favorite to kill off diesel. But there's a catch. Almost all hydrogen today is made from fossil gas, gray hydrogen, which isn't clean at all. Only green hydrogen, split from water using renewable electricity, delivers on the promise. And that is expensive to make. It's also wasteful. Making green hydrogen, compressing it, then turning it back into electricity throws away most of the energy. Only about a quarter reaches the wheels, against 70 to 80% for a wire or a battery. So in 2023, the very German region that pioneered the I-Link canceled its next hydrogen order and bought battery trains instead. A year later, most of that pioneering fleet sat idle. But hydrogen carries hidden baggage. A single hydrogen depot needs its own production plant, high-pressure storage, and a custom refueling station, an entire supply chain, built from scratch. A battery train just needs a wire it can already reach. Hydrogen isn't dead. It still suits the longest, loneliest routes, where wires are hopeless and a battery couldn't store enough. But for most of the map, a simpler answer was already winning. The battery train. The idea is simple. Where wires exist, the train runs on them, and tops up a big onboard battery. Where the wires stop, it keeps going on stored charge. They call it discontinuous electrification. Wire only the cheap stretches and let the battery bridge the gaps. And braking isn't wasted. It's harvested, pushing energy back into the battery. In 2021, a Stadler battery train set a record, 224 kilometers on a single charge, far beyond what anyone needs to bridge a gap in the wires. And a battery train is clever about energy. Every time it brakes, the motors spin backwards as generators, turning the train's momentum back into stored electricity, recovering up to 40% of the energy a diesel would simply burn away as heat. They're already here. Siemens, Hitachi, and Stadler battery trains entering service across Germany, Britain, and Italy. And in open competitions to replace diesel, operators keep reaching the same verdict. For most routes, the battery simply wins. Batteries aren't magic, though. They're heavy, they age, and on a long, remote, unwired line they can still run flat. The real answer was never one perfect train. It's matching every route to its cheapest clean option. But a clean train is only as clean as the power behind it. Get that right, and the results are extraordinary. Since 2017, every electric train in the Netherlands has run on 100% wind power, the first national railway on Earth to do it, carrying 1 million passengers a day on the breeze. Others are turning the railway itself into a power plant. India is covering station roofs and even carriage tops with solar panels, chasing a net-zero railway by 2030, which would make it the first on Earth. And in sunny Australia, one line already runs a train on sunlight alone. Because the biggest lever isn't on the train at all, it's the grid behind it. India alone needs around 30 gigawatts of new renewable power to run a net-zero railway. Clean the grid, and every electric train on it gets cleaner overnight. Then there's the driver, or the lack of one. Automation climbs a ladder, from a human in full control, up to grade 4, no driver on board at all. Driverless metros already glide through Paris and Copenhagen, with no one in the cab. And driverless trains are no longer science fiction. Paris, Copenhagen, Dubai, and Singapore already run metros with no one in the cab, more frequent, more punctual, and safer than the lines they replaced. And in the Australian outback, Rio Tinto runs what it calls the world's largest robot, fully autonomous freight trains, 2.5 kilometers long, hauling iron ore across the desert, steered from a control room 900 miles away. The smartest upgrade, though, is invisible. Digital signaling lets trains talk to the track and to each other, running closer together in perfect safety, squeezing 30 to 40% more capacity out of rails we already own. More trains, less concrete. Behind the scenes, the railway itself is going digital, a living computer model of the entire network, with artificial intelligence spotting a failing part before it breaks, and a delay before it happens. Put it on a timeline, and the path comes into focus. 2018, the first hydrogen train. 2023, battery trains in everyday service. 2030, India aims to be the first net-zero railway on the planet. 2040, Britain plans to retire its last diesel-only trains. In 2050, Europe and Britain target a railway with net-zero carbon, end-to-end. None of this is guaranteed. It will take cheaper batteries, a far bigger clean grid, and the political will to wire the busiest lines. The technology is mostly here. The hard part, now, is building it, at scale and in time. So what actually wins? Not one technology, a system, a backbone of electric wires for the busy lines, batteries to bridge the quiet ones, hydrogen held in reserve for the longest, hardest routes, all of it drawn from wind and sun and run by trains smart enough to drive themselves. The future of rail isn't a single magic machine. It's the cleanest network we've ever built, finishing the job it already started. Stay with us on Learn Railways, and we'll meet the next one down the line.